We were inspired by the revolutions in Egypt and Tunisia, and we want to make a change. This is the time of awakening of all the Arab countries, and we are not an exception. Morocco is not an exception.
The youth-led revolts that have swept across the Arab world in recent months haven't spared the more liberal regimes. Indeed, Morocco's monarchy is considered pro-Western and a pillar of reform in the region. But that hasn't made peaceful protest any easier for organizers like 23-year-old Oussama El Khalifi. Here in the capital, Rabat, they're fighting not only a policed-backed status quo, they're fighting for the identity of a movement.
حاجة واحدة هي اللي كنقولوا اللي قلت دائما أننا نحاولوا نتخلصوا من الإيديولوجيا ديالنا. باب النجاح ديالنا في لو فيفري هو أننا تخلصنا من التوجهات السياسية.
As in Egypt, Morocco's youth movement started on Facebook. But this flat is where the February 20th protests were planned, when 250,000 Moroccans marched nationwide demanding greater democracy.
We have made our revolution. It was just one-day revolution, but it had really good consequences because now people are talking.
All this movement, from Islamists to leftists, are victims of non-democracy that exists in Morocco.
But keeping the movement growing and attracting support across Morocco's political spectrum has become tricky as traditional opposition groups join and, some worry, try to take over this wave of change.
There are some NGOs, some parties, some other organisms that weren't affiliated to us and still are still not affiliated to us that try to appropriate the movement to them.
In February, 19-year-old Montasser Drisi began devoting more time to the movement, often missing schoolwork. He produced video campaigns and designed online logos in 5 languages.
To want to make change in a country, everybody has to know, everybody must be involved like we were involved in the other revolutions. This is the youth's movement and no one else.
The city of Rabat sits on Morocco's Atlantic coast and is the seat of parliament. Parliament is elected, but the king has sweeping powers. Under the constitution, he can dissolve parliament and appoint or dismiss the prime minister.
They have broken this.
The New York Times visited here in early March, soon after the February 20th group experienced a break-in. They suspected police.
Why do you think it's the police?
Because who will come and take pancards and maps? They didn't take anything else. Police everywhere and justice nowhere.
The group was in the midst of planning another national rally.
Everything has an expiration date. See you March 20th.
But first, they had a decision to make, whether to allow a competing group of activists into the movement. Not everyone was supportive of the idea.
وبالتالي الانضباط الرفاق راه نعطيكم بشويه عليكم نضموا ريوسنا ونهضروا بشويه وما تسمع
باش نديروا لا فيديو على كل فيديو نقدروا نديروا 4 الناس وتلاقاو وفاش كتقولي غنستناو حتى 7 باش يتزادوا الناس الاخرين توتو او كور لا سيمين ils ne sont pas là هادشي عادي عندي واحد المستجد
النقاش كان شويه حامي علاش لان اي واحد في الحركه الا وكيغير عليها.
Many cigarettes later, the group decided to meet with the other activists, and together they would plan the way forward. The new meeting space, the headquarters of an extreme socialist political party. Nizar Benamet from the February 20th group suggested doing an artistic frieze in front of the parliament as a way of keeping protests fresh. The size of the group doubled, but their demands stayed the same. A new constitution, dissolution of parliament, less corruption, more jobs, press freedoms, and better education. There was no mention of actually removing the king. Morocco's King Mohammed VI is widely popular and has recently called for piecemeal reforms. Over the last decade, his government has liberalized the economy and human rights have improved.
It's not like Tunisia and Egypt that people are anger and they want just one thing, so the president go out. No.
But they also don't want to negotiate with the king. A few days later, a national meeting of advocacy groups, trade unions, and political parties discussed support for the youth movement. Some parties, marginalized for years, saw an opportunity.
All people who are here think that we have a very good opportunity to get out of this absolute monarchy where the king is the only political player.
While admitting the need for logistical support, members of the February 20th movement were dubious of the council's ties with government. They don't want anything standing between them and change.
The 20th February cannot discuss with the regime because the demands are clear. We demand a democratic constitution.
The February 20th movement continues to stage weekly protests leading up to a nationwide rally on March 20th.
Everyone joins when you tell him that we want a democratic constitution that represents everyone. What we do to keep it a youth-led movement, we lead it.